Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Inside Arsenal Extra Time with myself, Charles Watts, and of course, James Benge of CBS. Good to have you back, James. How you doing, mate?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm tired, mate. Really, really tired. I've had you haven't had the joy yet of knowing what it's like to have a young child get sick in the night. That is sure to come for you, but yeah, it's brutal. And I had one of those nights last night when my son got very ill in the middle of the night, and yeah, it wasn't pretty.
Yeah, I can well imagine. I mean, the only time anyone in our household gets sick, it generally follows a sort of night of revelry. So you seems like you probably get the worst of both worlds there.
Yeah, honestly, mate, it was really, really bad. I have not slept. It was like it was a weird one because he woke up at 1 a.m. And then I was trying to get him back to sleep. I was lying on his bedroom floor trying to get him back to sleep. He wouldn't go to sleep, and he's in a bunk bed with his sister at the top. And I was like,
Oh, thank God she's at the top.
he was moving around so much. I was like, I've got to get him out of here because he's going to wake her up. Then it's going to be double as bad because she's going to be. So I got him downstairs. He was on the sofa. I thought about going to sleep, and then suddenly there was just projectile vomit everywhere, all over the sofas, carpet. Oh, it was so bad. It's so bad.
I mean, so a few people in the comments, didn't they, last week said they liked hearing us chat nonsense about our lives. I wonder how well that's holding up now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't even feel sorry because none of them had to actually deal with what I had to deal with last night, cleaning it up. So as bad as it sounds to listen to, it's much, much worse to clear it up. And I'm sure all of the parents out there who are watching know exactly what I'm talking about. But yeah, I'm hanging on by a thread today, unfortunately. And we're doing this on my wife's lunch break because I'm looking after him today downstairs for the day. So we've got about sort of a 50-minute window to get this.
People say they want to get into football journalism. It's the glamour of the job, folks.
The glamour, indeed. So yeah, aside from that, I'm not too bad. Yeah, still sort of getting over the disappointment of Sunday, really. I'm not as disappointed and as gutted as appears a lot of people are because it seems like the world has ended after a 2-2 draw against Tottenham in the North London derby. So we'll certainly talk about that today, get your thoughts on it all and the reaction to it, the performances. We'll look ahead to Brentford, of course, Carabao Cup action this week. Are you excited about Carabao Cup?
So I always have this thing. I've never seen Arsenal win the League Cup. Obviously, there are bigger trophies I'd like to see Arsenal win first, but I'm a little too young to sort of remember the days of the cup doubles and all that.
I was there. I saw Steve Morrow fall off Tony Adams' shoulder at Wembley. And one of the most
minute.
that was so bizarre because this was like 93, obviously, and this was pre-mobiles and Twitter and anything. And so we were just all in Wembley, the vast old Wembley, celebrating. And then suddenly it was like something's going on the pitch, and none of us, because it was so far away, it was like, what the hell's going on? It was such a bizarre end to a cup final, and no one had really having a clue what had happened from where we were, and not being able to get information like we would now. It was just a really, really bizarre day. Bizarre one, that.
Cursed competition, that.
I know. What finals we lost since then? Chelsea at Cardiff, the brawl of Cardiff, the City one. Yeah, Birmingham. Oh, my God.
Ugh. The Chelsea one stings because that was the one where, like, the print, you're like, oh, yeah, fine. Arsenal's thrown it. He's played the kids, hasn't he? And then Walcott scores in like the 4th minute.
Yeah, played really well.
Really good game. And we just got bullied by adults.
Drogba, what a surprise. But that Birmingham game, though, oh, my God. That was, if there was ever a moment that summed up the banter era more than that winning goal for Obafemi Martins, I mean, that was just the most classic Arsenal way to lose a cup final that you're expected to win ever.
It's the prime. It is the sort of start point, the pivot point of the banter era. I've never seen the game. That's the only thing I have to say. It's sort of, I was working that day, uni job or something like that. Came home, read, Lauren Koscielny howler hands at Birmingham City Carabao Cup or whatever it was like then. And I was like, yeah, I don't ever need to see that. Thank you very much. Never seen it. Never will.
Yeah. I actually laughed when it went. I was just me and Dad were at Wembley for it, and it was that moment of, has that actually just happened? I mean, Birmingham were dead on their feet. Literally, they couldn't run anymore. It was going to be such an easy extra time for Arsenal to win that cup final, and then in the last minute they go and do that. I just remember looking at Dad. It's just like, has that actually just happen. And it was such a horrible day. It was tipping down with rain as well. Oh, yeah, I've wiped that one from my mind. Hopefully we have a little bit more joy in the Carabao Cup this time around. So we will talk about that a little bit later on, look at who could play in that game. Got some comments from viewers as well. So we've predicted 11s, who they want to see play. So we'll do that. But I wanted to start today, James, because I didn't speak about it in my show this morning that I did, because I wanted to sort of focus on it more with you. And obviously the back pages, when we've spoken about, I think, was it last week's episode or was it the weekend before, this week before, we were talking about the sort of like a wish list of who Arsenal could get. And we were both talking about Toney at that point. And now the back pages are all over today. John Cross, obviously Crossy at the Mirror. It's also on the back of the Star because Reach own everything.
Yeah, that's another pod.
Saying Arteta really is now ready to step up his interest in Ivan Toney and, potentially try and bring him in January, just after his ban comes to an end. There's a price tag of 60 million at the moment being mentioned. Now, I think we've both got pretty differing views potentially on this. So let's hear what you have to say first about the potential arrival. And I mean, it's a long way off yet, obviously. But if this was to happen and Arsenal did step up their interest in Ivan Toney and brought him in, what would your thoughts on it be?
Yeah, I think 2 weeks ago, even when we were just sort of talking in generalities, I was quite keen. And I think then you hear these whispers and obviously, see guys like John, who's been sensational this summer, hasn't he, on Arsenal, report this, and you start thinking about it in more practical terms about, okay, 60 million, Ivan Toney, 27 years old. What does he bring to Arsenal to take them to the next level? And I'm just not quite seeing it. I think he's a fantastic footballer. I'm not saying that it would be a disastrous signing. I'm just saying it's not the one I think I would want to see Arsenal make. I will caveat that by saying, if in late January, I have a sense that Ivan Toney would put Arsenal over the top in a title race, then I completely retract everything I'm going to say here. Go for it. You win a title and you don't really need to justify whether 60 million is an overpay. But he's 27 years old. He scores a lot of penalties. The way that Brentford play football, which is based around his qualities, is nothing like the way Arsenal play football. It's long, it's direct. By the way, they still do that with Wissa and Mbeumo. And if you spend 60 million on him and Jesus are your front two for 3-4 years, for me, it feels like you're overpaying for a player that scores a lot of penalties. I don't think he has the craft around the box. He's a great plan B. I am that guy that every World Cup, every Euros, I'm like, England, please take a big, strong striker. Please take Ivan Toney, so that there's someone to launch the ball into the mixer in tournament football. But I think for a 38-game Premier League season for over 3 years, it doesn't all quite add up. 60 million, 27 years old. A lot of those goals are penalties. I'm just not there. I feel like you are, though.
Yeah, I'm pretty there. I really like the idea of Ivan Toney at Arsenal. I think he gives something different. When I say that, I don't sort of see him as Arsenal's guaranteed number 9 starting every single game. I just see him as another option for Mikel to use, and a really good option at that, where it's a different option, more importantly. I think he's definitely Premier League ready. I think he's going to have a point to prove. I think he's such a handful. I go back, I've never seen anyone cause William Saliba as many problems as I did Ivan Toney last season. I thought he was absolutely brilliant in that game. I think he would just bring something a little bit different to the table that Arsenal need. And again, I'm not saying he should be Arsenal's guaranteed starter up front, but I just think he would give Arsenal a different option. And
it's an expensive plan B, though.
It is I'm not saying it's a plan B, though. I'm not. I started looking at it more as a squad game, and it's like you pick and choose. We know what Arteta, what he says he's doing at the moment, anyway. Is building a squad where he can pick and choose players depending on the opponent and stuff like that. So I don't really look at him as a plan B. I just look at him as another plan A for a certain game that Mikel might like. And he is expensive. Ultimately, I don't really care about how much money it costs. It is not my money, so that doesn't really bother me too much. Like Arsenal spend a lot of money and they keep spending a lot of money. So I don't look at them spending 60 million on Toney and thinking they won't be able to spend anything else in the summer. I still think they will. And yeah, I mean, no, I'm not absolutely set on it. I don't think it's Toney or no one. I think there are certainly other options out there that could be looked at. But if they do decide that Toney's the guy that they want and they do bring him in, I think he's got a lot of attributes to make Arsenal a much better, stronger proposition in terms of the squad and what the sort of options Arteta will have available to it. I do look at his open play goals, and he's not prolific by any means, but would he be more prolific at Arsenal if he get the type of chances you would hope he'd create at Arsenal? He would have at Arsenal. Maybe he would. Sometimes players take that step up to the next level, and they sort of thrive on it, and they take their game to the next level, and their goal record goes up. So yeah, it's an interesting one. When you look at why he's banned at the moment, and you look at Mikel Arteta and the whole non-negotiables and all that sort of stuff. Do you have? And I've had a few comments about this. Do you? People say, "Oh, Arteta wouldn't touch him because of what's going on." Do you buy into that?
No, I don't think that's an issue at all. Frankly, I mean, so I watched, and God, what's the guy's name? The guy from Dragon's Den, his podcast. I can't stand him. That's a side note. Steve, it's not Stephen Merchant because he wrote The Office. Whatever his name is, not Stephen Mulhern. It's something like that.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
The Diary of a CEO is the name of the podcast. And I watched that whole Toney interview. And it's silly. And, there's a sort of an inkling there of like, come on, mate, you should know that you must have known that it's against the rules of the laws of the game for you to ban. It's against to gamble. It's against FA regulations. You should know that, and I don't kind of believe that you didn't. But it just, you do get the sense he's learned his lesson, and the way he was talking was so, I'm coming back to take over, to prove a point, to be better. And then, of course, there was that moment where the host, who's a Man United fan, was going,
Stephen Bartlett.
Stephen Bartlett, that's the one. Had to make it about himself, didn't he? And he was like, oh, next club, Man United. And Toney was like, yeah, I'm a Liverpool fan, but you know who's good? Arsenal.
Yeah.
And you knew from then on, you were like, right, 6 months, 12 months, buckle yourselves in. We're going to be hearing Toney to Arsenal all the time.
I thought that was really interesting. We spoke about that before, didn't we? Just where he deliberately turned that conversation to Arsenal out of, it was Bartley was clearly taking it down another route, and he just put on his head Toney very deliberately and spoke about Arsenal, which again gets my sort of senses up of, are we in a sort of Declan Rice situation where already a lot of work's going on behind the scenes to try and potentially, get this to a position that when the window does open, that Arsenal are ready to move, and they are very much at the front of the queue for when the potential bidding war starts.
They have been so good at that as late, with the players they really want. Because, we forget that Mudryk didn't happen, but it wasn't because Arsenal hadn't sold the project to Mykhailo Mudryk. I mean, I frankly got the sense, that he's almost like a hostage there at Chelsea, isn't he? Because he was so desperate to move to Arsenal because of the groundwork they put in. The same with Declan Rice, who pretty much didn't really push for Man City. But, and you do wonder, you're like, oh, there's this sort of weird thing, isn't there, between Toney and Arsenal going right the way back to that nice kickabout with the lads. Things like that. I really like that. He's got a bit of spike, a bit of aggro. He's going to be coming back, it sounds like, with a point to prove. So all that off-field stuff I like about Toney. That's the sort of things that I'm like, yeah, his character would fit really well in this Arsenal dressing room. I think, he would come with a point to prove, totally focused on Premier League titles. It's almost the on-field, if he was 23, 24, I'd be like, there's time there for Mikel Arteta to really hone him into the ultimate Arsenal striker. At 27, the thing with the ban is it's the unknown of what he comes back like. He's back in training already, so he will have had the training time, but it's a lot of missed football. And, it's almost like coming back from an injury, isn't it? Until you see them do it, you can never be sure. So I'm kind of looking at this as 27-year-old who has had a long period off the pitch. It feels like too much of a gamble at 60 million.
a lot of this sort of talk about strikers has come off the back of the Derby draw at the weekend. Obviously, everyone's saying Arsenal need a striker. Arsenal need a striker. Nketiah was poor. Jesus missed a big chance. But I got a couple of comments here from viewers, Gunnar Philosopher and Gordon Patterson. And both of these comments here, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see it on the screen, sort of saying, look, striker isn't the biggest need. We've still yet to replace Xhaka. Obviously, Havertz hasn't hit the ground running yet. Whether he does, we'll have to wait and see. Smith Rowe's not really getting opportunities too much. So, no one's really stepped up and filled the Granit Xhaka void at the moment. And people are looking at that and saying that when you look at Arsenal's start to the season, the first 6 games of the season, that is potentially the big thing that is missing so far, and the thing that is just sort of ensuring that Arsenal aren't quite clicking as much as they were in the sort of start of last season. But when you look at it and you sort of focus ahead to January and what Arsenal might do to sort of try and get them, I don't know, over the line or make them a stronger proposition in the second half of the season, I still feel like I cannot imagine that they're going to dip back into the market for that sort of number 8 position. I think striker's certainly going to be ahead of that. They're going to still try and work with what they've got in that role.
I think you're totally right. Arteta has sort of invested a lot of capital, both actual and his coaching stock in Kai Havertz. I think the thing that sort of nags in the back of your mind is when we talk about the alternative qualities that Toney could bring, how many of them would Havertz bring as the alternative number 9? He is tall, he wins his headers, he's a good outlet, and he holds play up really well, and then has that final pass. Of course, what he doesn't have at the moment and doesn't hugely feel like is coming right now is the confidence and fearlessness of a top striker. But I was, when the amid all this Toney talk, I have been thinking, could you take that money you'd spend on Toney and turn it into another midfielder and just a bit more variety? So sometimes Havertz will play that role, but sometimes you have your true Xhaka replacement, whoever that is. But you said, it seems like you're, I don't know. But then there's Vieira as well. I find it really hard to put my finger on where Arsenal need to sort of take that next step forward, because it feels like something's missing. Maybe I kidded myself. It was all Jesus against PSV. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. It just feels like at the moment we're in kind of murky waters, and maybe I need to navigate.
These comments, I think, are spot on. I think at the moment, what the Xhaka thing is clearly not having Granit there, how well he played last season, how consistent he was last season, what he was doing in the final third last season, not having that now this season, it's clearly Arsenal missing that, because the player that they brought in to replace him isn't firing yet and isn't producing anything like what Granit did. And I'm not sitting there. I'm not going to start and launch into a Havertz bashing moment by any means, but I think it's just blatantly obvious, isn't it, that the player Arsenal brought in to replace such a vital player of last season isn't performing yet, and so they're obviously going to struggle a little bit because of that. Hopefully it can sort of click and sort itself out, but at the moment I think that is definitely missing. I agree, Havertz can play in that 9 role, but I still think there's no comparison to me. If you got a choice between Toney and Kai Havertz playing as number 9, then there's only one winner there for me. We'll move into the derby now. It was a weird game on Sunday. I thought I thought Arsenal were great for 30 minutes or good for 30 minutes, maybe not great.
I thought great.
They were good. The pressing was unreal. It was, Tottenham couldn't get out of their half. They got the goal. The Jesus miss was such a massive moment in the game. That goes in 2-0. Arsenal win that game for me. It didn't. That seemed to have a big negative impact on Arsenal, and it had the complete opposite on Tottenham, who suddenly launched into their best spell of the game. Arsenal did what Arsenal do and failed to keep a clean sheet at the Emirates, let Tottenham back in the game. And then it was very, very different after that. The injuries at half-time, the replacements at half-time certainly changed things. And it was one of those games. I think at the end of it, I was kind of relieved that Arsenal hadn't lost, but I was also really disappointed that Arsenal hadn't won, because they could have won. They got themselves in the position to win, and they just made stupid errors once again. And the reaction's been pretty mad, though. Like, I've seen words like abomination and just like the Arteta out stuff, and
No, I haven't actually seen any of that.
just people, just not maybe not saying Arteta out, but just saying Arteta's not the man. He's not, we're never going to win the league under him and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, just like absolutely slagging it. It's a North London derby. I mean, I'm just from a different era, but I just look at it. It's even when Arsenal were at their very best and Tottenham were properly rubbish, like they honestly were, you'd still have North London derbies where it would be a draw, and that's why everyone loves this game. It's what it's about. It's almost like a cup game, isn't it? Rather than it's the same with any derby. You're not guaranteed to win, and this Tottenham team are pretty decent. They're showing they're pretty decent, and I didn't come away from the ground as I was leaving thinking that's a disastrous result by any means. I was just disappointed that Arsenal hadn't won because I felt like they could have done. But it's just, I don't know, some of the reaction to any drop points now is just, it just feels really, really over the top to me. But then I do also understand that if you're trying to win the title, which I guess we're all hoping that could have happened this season or could happen this season, we know that you can barely afford to drop points because of who you're up against. And so there is that into it. But yeah, I mean, what were your thoughts sitting over in the press box? You were opposite me, obviously. I was in the stands. I think it was the first North London derby I was sitting in the stands, as in a proper...
Well, we'll talk about the game, but how different was that as an experience?
Oh, it was very different, but...
you're quite near the away fans as well, aren't you?
Right next to the away fans, yeah. So it was great. It was great, but it was just weird because every time Arsenal, you thought you were on top, straight away almost, it was pegged back. So you never had that sort of time to enjoy it and rub Spurs' fans' noses in it, which is a little bit disappointing. So no, it was really good. It was great to be there again, but obviously, as I said, still left the stadium pretty frustrated that we hadn't taken all 3 points, because although we didn't play at our best, it still feels like a game that Arsenal should have won.
Yeah, frustration does really sum it up. I mean, you think some of the reactions wild about Arteta out. I mean, there seems to have been quite a significant James Benge out movement because I happen to have
Bozo
broken my streak. Yes. I mean, what I would say there is I have actually been to a lot of North London derbies that Arsenal have won as well. I just missed a few.
That was a brilliant. I've not heard
Bozo. It's a great insult
in a long time. That was a very good social media trolling. I thought Bozo. It just made me laugh. Obviously, not making me laugh that you're getting a load of dogs abuse. Media, but I just thought, what brilliant! Of all the words to pick, you go with Bozo.
I mean, you sort of find this now. I'm sure you'll be even more the same because you've got a lot more followers than me on Twitter. But you have to, and you've had this in the pod as well. You see these things that you just sort of say that you just put out there for a bit of a laugh. Like when we said 7 players from the academy would start over Nicola Pepe, and that gets aggregated into news. Or you say, I've never been to, the last 3 London derbies I've missed, Arsenal have lost, and there are just mentalists out there who would go, oh, it is actually your fault then. And some of it felt like they genuinely thought that. Anyway, game. I thought Arsenal were brilliant for half an hour. Really good. I know some of these stats feel a bit needlessly precise, and like I've tailored the data to make the stats, but 6 ball recoveries in the Spurs third in the period leading up to Christian Romero's brilliant own goal. I mean, if that's an Olivier Giroud-esque near post finish, I thought. And that's only since the start of 2021, only 6 teams have managed more final third recoveries. And I thought Arsenal had throttled Spurs. Spurs were bringing back 8 players just to get the ball moving around their own half. I guess the thing, and Arteta did hint at this in the presser, was Arsenal just played the start of that game at 100 miles an hour. And when you played 2 games in the preceding 7 days, you probably can't do that. Especially when Declan Rice comes out. I thought you really discovered how massive losing him was, because if you're Ødegaard, if you're Vieira, Jesus, you can press, because so often Spurs would just about break through Arsenal's first line and Declan Rice would just go bang, straight through them, win the ball back, easy peasy. And Arsenal would be back where they wanted to be. And there was a moment in like the 70th minute where Jorginho tries it, Maddison beats him, and you're like, yeah, Jorginho's net won't even get back to the penalty area. So, I mean, it felt like a game I wonder how different the game is if Rice can just play through this back niggle. finishing's frustrating. The errors are frustrating, but like they happen. I'm fairly positive about it because, like you say, like it is the North London derby. You do have to sort of throw the form book out of the window a little bit. And Arsenal were the better team. I just at full tilt. I hope what Arteta takes away from this game is the substitution pattern was. His substitutions were as bad a mistake as any that the players made. I think bringing on Jorginho and leaving him on his own was a mess for that goal. I seem to remember that there's basically no option ahead of him. So it's a really bad touch. It's Jorginho's fault. But, you know, my thing here is if he had Mohamed El Neni next to him, and I would have brought El Neni on for Vieira and gone, or had Erdegaard or Havertz sit next to him, he just plays the ball sideways. I thought leaving Jorginho on an island was a disaster. Taking Jesus off when Xhaka was injured was a really, really bad decision. And we talk about this in terms of Brentford as well. Like, if Nketiah is struggling, if Jesus is looking tired, Saka's injured, why is Emile Smith Rowe not coming on until, was it the 93rd minute? I had it down as 89th. It's
97th. I think it was 96th, 97th minute. He literally got last like 3
and
or 4
in that time, he still completed more dribbles than any other player on the pitch except Jesus. It's the substitutions from Arteta. It's been an issue we've been hammering him for, whilst praising him for so much else over the last 2-3 years. Even with 5 injuries, the options were there and he used them so poorly, so poorly. And I think that's the real disappointment from his perspective. And I'm sure that's what he'll dwell on. Great moment.
What did you make of who was it? It was Havertz came on for Vieira at the same time, didn't he? What did you make of making that sub at the same time? And the fact Mikel said it was obviously tactical. Do you think had Rice been on the pitch, that sub would have happened anyway? Or do you think he made that sub because he was taking Rice off and he felt like getting Havertz on and adding maybe a little bit more sort of height into that area without Rice was essential to him?
Oh, that's a good question. I hadn't thought of it like that. I always thought of it as a sort of like getting Havertz into the attacking third. But because, like Vieira and Jorginho is not going to win any balls, any aerial duels on the edge of the penalty area, is it? So, mate, but then Havertz didn't do that, did he?
Not particularly.
I just don't know that Havertz knows what he's meant to be doing at any moment. He started early on; he was deep a bit. You tell me. I really don't know what Havertz.
I was just really surprised because I mean, obviously, it's different when you're watching in the stands as well. And I got this when I did my player ratings afterwards. Everyone hammered me for it. And it's very different, I think, when you're not sitting in either watching it on TV or you're in the press setting and you're sort of watching it more as with your professional head on. Like, I thought certain players played all right, and I thought Odegaard did all right, but I was basing that on his pressing, and then everyone was saying, "Oh, he was awful. He couldn't complete a pass." But I didn't think Vieira had that bad a first half, and I was really surprised that he went off at that point. But so I was kind of wondering if it was just because Rice had gone off and he wanted Havertz on to have a little bit more sort of physicality and stature in that area, but I wasn't sure. I mean, it just it didn't work. It didn't work too much. But people were hammering Jorginho afterwards as well, going, "Oh, Chelsea reject," and all that stuff. All that Chelsea stuff started coming back out again. It's like he's been a really good signing. He's done barely anything wrong since he signed. I mean, Maddison made the exact same mistake in the first half. The only difference was Jesus blazed a chance over. Tottenham, as they do, and certainly as Son does, he's so clinical when he gets his chances. He stuck it away. And
it's so annoying that he's like back, isn't it? I was like,
annoying.
Good riddance to elite level Son at the end of last season. I was like, and with him go Spurs. Annoyingly, if Son's good, Spurs might be all right.
He just doesn't miss. He's just such a good finisher when he gets chances. And obviously he stuck it away. But now you're not going to need Spurs fans going, "Oh, Maddison, Leicester reject," or whatever, just because he'd made that one error. It happens. So it's not Jorginho's fault necessarily. Arsenal lost that. Didn't win that game. I thought, again, some of the reaction to him was just really, really over the top. But yeah, it was definitely 2 points drop. I came away from it thinking it was 2 points drop, not so much because of the level of performance or the level of Spurs' performance. I just looked at some of the areas, the goals that Arsenal conceded, the big miss of Jesus, and thinking, that Arsenal could have done better. And David Raya was in goal. I've got a question here. He got his start. Again, like I came back. I came home and And I was reading on social media, and people were saying, "Oh, Raya had a shocker performance. He was at fault for the second goal." And I was like, I have to watch this again now. Has he done something that I hadn't spotted? And I was like, what was Raya supposed to do for that second goal? I mean, the first one, maybe he could have clawed that cross over, but sort of put it more out of harm's way than he did. But there was, I think if you're going to blame anyone,
did he not also make the save of the season?
I know, just before, and even the save he made after clawing it out, he got up and saved again from Johnson before Spurs recycled it, and Xhaka got absolutely done by Maddison down the left. So I think if you're going to blame anyone for the first goal, I wouldn't be blaming Raya. And look, his distribution was unusually poor, I thought, but I think that just went through the whole team. Arsenal couldn't really complete passes. I think you said that they were so good in that first half hour how they pressed, and they did press really well. But Mikel was saying they played at 100 mile an hour, but it was almost like they played at that pace to get the ball, but once they got it, they couldn't calm themselves down enough to actually then play the way they wanted to play. It was all just so frenetic, so chaotic that they were just doing things in possession that they wouldn't usually do, and they were very, very slack. And I thought Raya was as well. And I think once a couple of passes went astray, nerves probably came in. It was a big day for him. But I don't look at that performance and think, oh, that's it for David Raya. Ramsdale should come back in now for that. I didn't think he did necessarily that much wrong.
Although he's probably coming back in, isn't he?
Well, he will for Brentford, obviously, but I imagine at Bournemouth at the weekend, it will certainly be Raya still.
It feels a little bit like some of the standards now being set for Arsenal players by the people that we often hear from in the Arsenal fan base online are impossible for any player to reach. It's like, I mean, I know that Jorginho, it's the sort of area we'd pick on for years, but some slightly shonky passing from David Raya is not the reason Arsenal didn't win the North London derby, and it also doesn't mean he had a bad game. You have to take this in totality and say, yes, it really could have been a lot better with the ball at his feet, but that save he made. And I know that Spurs scored pretty soon after, but let's remember the good stuff. It feels a lot like this at the moment within the Arsenal fan base. There's so much sort of picking at scabs and picking at that wasn't perfect. I know that that's the standard City set for their player for their rivals is perfection, but sometimes that standard is just unachievable. And yeah, I can't believe people thought Raya had a bad game. It wasn't a great game, but it's not a bad game.
No. I mean, it's easy to forget that Arsenal are still unbeaten this season. Yeah. They played 6 in the league, won 4, drawn 2. They're only 1 point worse off than they were at this stage last season in the Premier League. They've obviously started the Champions League with thumping 4-0 home wins. So it's not been a disastrous start to the season by any means. I just think the whole raised expectations, everything of what happened last season and what everyone was kind of hoping was going to happen this season, it just makes I think.
Question for you, if you were at the start of the season, if you were thinking, we all plot in our head how Arsenal win the league. How did you think it would happen? Did you think Arsenal would become a 97, 98 point team, or did you think they'd need a helping hand from City?
No, I certainly didn't think there'd be a 97, 98 point team. I don't think that. No, I don't look at this team and seeing that. And yeah, I just think it's going to be a closer league, and I think more teams can take more points off the top teams. Obviously, no one did that really against City. Not too much. Liverpool obviously beat them at Anfield, but I just think more. It's going to be, and we're seeing it already actually with the quality. With Spurs are obviously up there. They've improved. Liverpool are clearly showing signs of, they could well really sort of mount a challenge this year potentially for the title. Brighton, you just cannot rule Brighton out. They're just doing superbly well, and just look a real team who are going to give anyone problems. So, I think. Yeah, I don't look at Arsenal being a 97, 98 point team. I think if they're going to win the title,
we all said it. We all said early in the season, we said by the time City come to the Emirates, because their fixture list has been pretty soft, we said it's really, really unlikely that Arsenal will be, 3 points clear in the same way they were last season. 4 is definitely not ideal. I'm sure Arteta would have hoped that someone somewhere along the way would have spoiled the day for City, but I think it felt eminently possible that they would just roll out 6 wins from 6, that Arsenal would be around the 14-point mark. And I know the way they've got there has not been as swashbuckling, and there's not been as many shots and goals as people might like, but like exactly like you're saying, a bit of perspective here, guys. It's okay.
Yeah, it's not terrible by any means. And there are a lot of injuries that Arsenal are struggling with at the moment, which have to be taken into account. Brentford tomorrow night, it's obviously going to be lots of changes, no doubt about it, in terms of who could play. I've just brought Emil Smith Rowe up onto the screen, who I'm desperately hoping gets a start.
Do you know when he last started the game?
Oh, God. Emil Smith Rowe, last Arsenal start. Well, it wasn't last season, so...
No.
Oh, God, I don't even know. It must be back towards the Chelsea game that you scored at Stamford Bridge, around there in that season when they were going for the top four.
A little later on, and it's not a game you're going to want reminding of. May 2022, Newcastle away.
Newcastle away. God. There you go. So yeah, I'm really hoping he gets a start, and I'm not the only one. It's like, here's Richardson. If ESR doesn't start against Brentford, I'll be really annoyed. Can't believe he's not getting more game time. Lots of people are saying that. I've got one here from I can't even pronounce that name. Apologies for that. But look, this is the team he wants to see tomorrow night. Obviously, Ramsdale, Tommy, Gabriel, Kivior, Cedric, El Neni, Jorginho, Fabio, Reece, Kai, and Smith Rowe. I think he's definitely going to make changes. 100%. We're not going to see too strong a team out there in terms of what we're used to in the Premier League. But what's the sort of team that you'd like to see on Wednesday night, or you're expecting?
Yeah, that one there we saw they looked a little too rotation-y for what I expect Arteta to do. We always think he's going to change 11 players.
Yeah,
maybe he should, but he doesn't really. So I think you might see a couple of the very senior players, your Jesus's, Salibas. I think Jesus might well start this one.
Really?
I mean, yeah, Jorginho obviously comes in, and El Neni's the one I'm sort of intrigued about, because if Jorginho is going to be playing a lot of minutes, if he's going to have to play against Bournemouth, and kind of we think that Rice is hopeful but not guaranteed, like worth getting some minutes in El Neni's legs, and just making sure you're putting yourself in a position to win this game as well. I mean, Tom, this is the game where, isn't it, where the defense feels quite light. I guess maybe you'll see Kivior left back, I wonder.
See, I wonder if we see Kivior left back and one of the two main guys starts, and you could potentially use Cedric at right back, or even if could we see a Raul Walters, someone like that potentially?
That would be the fun one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the one I'm really intrigued by is Smith Rowe, because this, for an EFL Cup third round game, this feels like one of the biggest games in his Arsenal career.
He knows that.
He has to start. And not only does he have to start, he has to have a very good game, because what is clear is he's fighting an uphill battle. Fabio Vieira is Mikel Arteta's man. He's someone that he has given loads of chances to, and Vieira has made the most of those chances this season. Kai Havertz is a £60 million signing. Smith Rowe wasn't signed by Arteta. I think Arteta would probably admit he owes Smith Rowe a huge, huge dose of gratitude for that game against Chelsea. I mean, don't forget, go right the way back to the start of Smith Rowe's Arsenal breakout. If Willian I was reading this in your book, if Willian's fit, Willian plays that game. And
was he ill or something? I can't remember what it was.
Yeah,
I wrote about it.
It was something very minor, wasn't it? Because it happened on that morning. And so I think that there has often been a sense that Smith Rowe has to fight this battle to convince Arteta that he is worthy of a spot. And also, I think this is just from an Arsenal perspective. If I were to do, I would be saying, look, you told Smith Rowe in the summer, and you told Smith Rowe's rep camp, he's going nowhere. So that's a player that 2 years ago we were saying we wouldn't even have a conversation with Aston Villa if they weren't bidding £70 million. Don't you spoil this asset. Don't you give us another Kieran Tierney, a player that could have been worth 40 million that we're having to loan out. So I think there should actually be pressure on Arteta. There's hardly ever pressure on Arteta from above, is there? But there should be pressure on Arteta. Get the most out of this player. It doesn't have to be playing him in the Premier League week in, week out. But let's not let a valuable asset and a talented player waste away. Because, So what do you think? Biggest game of his career since the Chelsea game?
Well, I mean, he's right up there, like you said, but it almost feels like it's unfair pressure on him, isn't it? He hasn't started a game in over a season, and yet it's like, oh, he's got to play well. He has to play well, otherwise he's not going to get another look in. And I just think that's just really not fair on him, is it? And again, it's down to Arteta just to find more opportunities for him to play, so there's not so much pressure on any, this kind of chance that he has, because it's very, very hard for a player to come in under huge amounts of pressure to perform. And to do it, I mean, just look at Kai Havertz at the moment as the pressure's growing on him week in, week out. Would you be starting Kai in this game? I think you might. I think he'll be looking at it. I mean, he knows that Havertz has got to do something soon. He knows, just for Arsenal's sake, but for Havertz's sake as well, and his confidence. He needs a big moment. He just needs a goal, something to spark him into life. And you want to give him more opportunities and not to do that. And I look at this game. He didn't start at the weekend, obviously. I don't think he necessarily starts against Bournemouth this weekend in the Premier League. So I think he's probably going to start Havertz. I think he probably plays.
Yeah, so maybe I'm wrong on Jesus. And I think you hit the key word there is confidence. And I just want to give him so many opportunities to turn it around, because none of it feels unfixable with Havertz. I think there are, he has to adapt to a very particular position, but above all else, I just want to. He doesn't ever seem to be playing with a smile on his face.
He's got the weight of the world on his shoulders, isn't it?
Yeah,
it looks like that.
It feels like he's brought what came from Chelsea with him, and he just needs a sort of a real sense of a fresh start. So, yeah, there's probably not a better chance to get that than against a Brentford team that I guess you hope would be rotated if you're Arteta. I mean, God, if it's not, it could be a dispiriting day for him. And that almost the worry is it could get worse. But right now you've got to give it chances to get better. So yeah, take back what I was saying about Jesus. Get Havertz in there, get him, even if it's not his position. He's looked better as a 9. I'd like to see that and see if he can spark from there.
Yeah, I think so. I really hope he doesn't start in that left 8 role and Smith Rowe's on the bench. I'd just be really, really annoyed. So no, I agree. I kind of look at that number 9 role maybe as him playing that on Wednesday night ahead of the Bournemouth game, and we'll wait to see who's back fit for Bournemouth. Like I said, Rice's injury not as bad as initially feared, so hopefully he'll be back. If not for that, he'll certainly be okay. You would hope for City, although there is the Champions League game before that. Thomas Partey, as far as I'm aware, is ahead of schedule and is very much targeting the Man City game to be back for. And I think if you
it's quite it's going to be nip and tuck, that one, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's what he is definitely targeting it. Whether Arsenal decide to risk it, we'll have to wait and see. But
I tell you, you don't want to get. I don't want to run on too long because you've got to go, and I don't want to get too optimistic because we do that about Man City games and it tends to backfire. If you could have a midfield 3 of Partey, Rice, and Ødegaard coming up against a midfield that won't have Rodri, I'm letting myself hope.
I mean, it's the only time we've seen that midfield this season was in the Community Shield against City, wasn't it? We saw Rice, Partey, Ødegaard, and they played really, really well together and stifled Man City a lot in that game, I thought. So, yeah, fingers crossed. But that's one maybe for next week's show. I've just realised I've used the wrong logo today. We've got the old Inside Arsenal at the top. So it's the wrong logo.
Use the right intro and outro.
Didn't use the right. I'll make sure I use the intro. We're going to do the outro now because, like I said, I am on the clock at the moment and my time during my wife's lunch break is about to run out. So I'm going to have to go back to dad duties and look after the boy downstairs. So thank you very much for that, James. Enjoy. Are you at one of the cup games this week? Or are you?
I'm going to G-Tech or whatever you call it. I'm going to Brentford. It'll be fun. Are you there? You at way end?
No, I am not. I am going to be here. So
is it on TV?
It's not. No. So I'll be.
I love the games that aren't on TV.
Following it on Twitter, I imagine, because I would never ever look for an illegal stream because that's not something that I would ever do, obviously. So yeah, we shall see. Well, look, enjoy it, mate. Hopefully get another 3-0 win like last season to report on. Thanks very much for joining me, and for everyone watching or listening to this around the world. I hope you're having a very good start to your week, and you have an excellent one. We'll be back next week. What day? What's Champions League is Tuesday,
Tuesday.
Isn't it? Tuesday. So we're probably not going to do it on Tuesday. I imagine we'll probably have to move it to Wednesday. Makes sense to move it to Wednesday, doesn't it? And then we can react hopefully to another Champions League win and certainly start to look forward to that huge game against Manchester City a few days after that. Cheers, mate. Have a good day. I'll speak to you soon.
Cheers. See you next week.